You're listening to Binjang 91.5, and it's time for Tech Talk with Mathew Dickerson. Good afternoon, Matthew.
Good afternoon, Tony. Good to be chatting to you again after our morning session today.
Yes, enthralling it was. Quite interesting. Now, which country can lay claim to having the fastest supercomputer in the world? It's a bit of a competition, isn't it?
It is a bit of a competition, and it's really been ruled for the last, I think probably 8 or 9 years by Chinese and American companies that have actually produced the fastest supercomputer in the world. But this time, for something a bit unusual, a Japanese supercomputer has taken the top prize. Now, it's been clocked at 415.53 petaflops. Now, a petaflop is basically 1 quadrillion floating point operations. And to give you an idea, if we were to sit down and do a petaflop, say 1 per second, then it's basically since the beginning of time, we would have gotten through what this computer could do in 1 second. So basically 13.2 billion years it would take a human to do what this is capable of doing in 1 second. So it's not too bad in terms of its power to basically be able to produce that 415 petaflops. So it's actually a bit of a breakthrough as well. You've got ARM computing, advanced reduced instruction set computing. It's the first time one of their chips has taken the lead slot on this particular supercomputer list. So basically it's a couple of firsts there. So the computer is called Fugaku, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, Fugaku. And so in second place, who knows? In second place was an IBM computer, and it was at a pathetic 266.93 petaflops, so hardly worth even rating that one. But there were competitors from all around the world. You had, as I said, the one from US, IBM. You had China, you had Italy in there in the race, even one from Switzerland. So it's actually something, there's no prize as such for it. It's really about boasting about what you've got in terms of your country. Essentially, people go, well, that's great, it all sounds very good, but what are they used for? This particular computer is used to do a whole range of things, including some research on COVID-19. So it's doing natural disaster simulations, it's doing studies into some basic laws of the universe, but also doing some studies into preventative medicine and what might happen with various medicine treatments. So again, we sit back and go, yeah, this is fun, we quote some big numbers, that all sounds great. But the modelling, that's when you use this supercomputer power. When you start to try and model things that are happening in the real world and have a huge number of variables, that's when you really see the power of one of these supercomputers.
Yes, Matthew. And the interesting thing is they've been saying for a long time now that once they've got a supercomputer that's readily available and fast enough to do the job, they'll be able to map the world's weather properly and get it right. So they're really focused on actually achieving that too. So we can expect that to happen somewhere down the track.
Down the track, I think you're right, Tony. I think down the track are the operative words there, because I think we're some way from that yet, and obviously we get it nowhere near right at the moment. But look, I think that's the theory, that you could do that, but there's so many variables feeding into weather patterns that's where you do need that power.
Yep, and I just noticed too, I saw some literature during the week on the University of New South Wales supercomputing school, you could call it, research school, and they've been making breakthroughs, that are world-leading breakthroughs when it comes to supercomputing and chips.
Yeah, so, and there's a fair bit of work being done in Australia on quantum computing as well. And so, we're not up there in the supercomputer list at the moment. Japan, China, the US, as we've heard, but we certainly do some good research.
Yeah, actually, I was referring to quantum computing there at the University of New South Wales. Now, Matthew, which companies are the latest to join the Facebook boycott? Very controversial, isn't it?
It is. It's big news. Coca-Cola. You've got some major players here. Coca-Cola has just joined the Facebook boycott. Just before them, Honda and Hershey. Now, Hershey's not that big in Australia, but in the US, Hershey's a huge company. So they've joined a number of other large companies in the latest boycott. And they're basically saying we're not going to advertise on Facebook for 30 days starting as of July 1st, starting tomorrow. And so this is, I think, a big play from the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. When you get companies like Coca-Cola that are signing up to this, you've started to make a real impact. I suppose the big question is, how much of an impact will it have on Facebook? How much notice will they take of it all? Will they make some policy changes? Well, Mark Zuckerberg has been making some policy changes. He's not saying that this is because of the boycott, but you can imagine, and let's not feel too sorry for him, but poor old Mark has lost $10 billion in his net worth over the last week because Facebook shares have gone down by 8%. So again, he's still got a couple of dollars. He's still going to have bread on the table, I think, tonight. But $10 billion off the value or net value is probably something that you start to say, we should do something about it. So they're starting to make some changes in what they do. They're starting to take notice of some of the misinformation that's put on Facebook by various people, including people like Donald Trump. But I think they're starting to finally see that the public is really starting to speak here. And if they speak loud enough, suddenly their 1.3 billion user base will be reduced quite quickly. As large as Facebook is, it doesn't matter who you are, how big you are always able to be basically pushed aside by public opinion.
Well, that's for sure. And Mark Zuckerberg has the mindset of basically challenging every possible boundary, finding new markets for what he's doing. And he doesn't stop unless he gets a reaction against it. So he's very reactive in what he does because he's always pushing the boundaries and he's always deliberately doing it. He wants to see how much he can get away with. And the pushback is coming, not just from companies, but also from governments as well. And they've been looking at how to do it for a long time, but slowly but surely, and even in Australia here, that's starting to happen, isn't it?
It is, and I think you could probably argue that the only reason the Stop Hate for Profit campaign has started is because I see, and a number of other commentators see, that there probably has been a failing from government to curb some of this behaviour. And so the public's spoken. If the government hasn't, the public is starting to speak. And when you get a campaign that gets some of those companies like the Hondas, like the Hershey's, like the Coca-Colas, to take notice and change what they're doing, then that's a pretty effective campaign. So the organisers of the Stop Hate for Profit can be very proud of themselves so far. But I think what they're really trying to impact is change on Facebook. And I think we'll start to see that again, despite the fact that the government hasn't been stepping in and doing something about it.
Yeah, I think it's important. And, well, that's how governments work and how business works and everything, I suppose. It's a competition, really, between both things sometimes.
It is, yeah.
Now, do you think a boycott could possibly kill Facebook off?
It sounds like a big call, doesn't it? We think of Facebook, we think of a huge organisation, not that old an organisation, but we think of a huge organisation with a huge amount of finance behind it. But when you think what they don't have a physical product. What they have is users. They've got about 1.3 billion users on Facebook. And what advertisers want is they want those eyeballs. So if suddenly you get to the point where if Facebook isn't the flavour of the month, then that can make a big impact on Facebook's bottom line. Will it be the end of Facebook? Oh, gee, I don't know if this will be the end of Facebook. Facebook will probably die off at some point in time, but I'm not sure if this will be the end. But boycotts can be very effective. We've seen examples through history where boycotts have made incredible changes to various, whether it be government policies or private organisations. So I think this boycott is going to be a wake-up call to Facebook. The next part, Tony, will be to see how Facebook responds. If Facebook ignores it completely, yeah, sure, it may be the beginning of the end for Facebook. If Facebook does what they've already started to do, make some changes, make some policy changes, basically react, I suppose, to what's happening and change what they're delivering and the way they're delivering it, then I think they'll survive and I think they'll go on and keep thriving. But that's the real turning point for them at the moment is, are they going to react? Are they going to make change based on what's happening?
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, Matthew, Facebook really is nothing more than a marketing platform. It didn't start out that way, but that's what it is now, and they'll keep on evolving it as much as they possibly can.
Yep. And
it's probably got a use-by date, or some other technology will supplant it into the future. That's how it normally goes.
That's right. And at the moment, even though you've got the large companies like the Starbucks and the Coca-Colas of the world that are boycotting Facebook, the real issue here is that the most amount of income that's generated for Facebook is not by a few of those very large companies. It's by lots of small companies, mums and dad companies, just those small companies that might only spend $20, $40, those sort of small amounts. But when you've got so many of these organisations that are out there, I'm talking about millions of organisations out there advertising those small amounts, that's when you'll see, or if those stopped advertising, that's when you'd see a major hit to the bottom line of Facebook. And unfortunately, at the moment, so many businesses are coming out of COVID-19. They really can't afford not to advertise. They're trying to get back on their feet. They're trying to get customers back in the door. They're relying on Facebook. So Coca-Cola probably won't notice a big hit to their bottom line by not advertising on Facebook for a month, but some of these other businesses, they might notice it. So I think if major change was going to happen there, you probably need to be in a better economic environment worldwide for some of those other businesses to be able to join in those boycotts.
That's for sure. And you've been listening to Tech Talk with Mathew Dickerson on Binjang 91.5. Stay tuned next week on Tuesday at 10 a.m. in the morning, 3:40 p.m. in the afternoon for the next edition. And it's now back to the great music and the community information on Binjang.
Great, Tony. Talk to you next week.